Hello and welcome to Dream It, Dare It, Do It, Live the Life You Want. I'm your host, Jasmine, and today I have a special friend. Her name is Marlene Cameron. Hi, Marlene.
Hi.
Hey guys, you've got Canadians today. We're both from Canada. We were just having a conversation. And we're like, hey, we're Canadians. The three principles people from Canada. Marlene, just for the people listening to us, can you share a little bit what you do and let them know where you're at so those who are listening to will be able to reach you?
Okay. So I'm in Calgary, Alberta, and I work as a business coach for professional women in business. And I'll just say a little bit about my journey as a coach, because I took my coach training in 2002 and started off doing really traditional executive and business coaching. And then I kind of went over to an area called energy psychology and became an emotional freedom techniques or tapping practitioner and then trainer. And so I worked as a trainer and certified other practitioners for many years. And it was actually an EFT trainer in Vancouver who introduced me to the three principles. And so I've gone on to really embrace the three principles as a foundation for my work.
Yeah. And the reason for you, the listener, the reason why we're actually having an impromptu podcast because we were just chatting because we just got to know each other. And as Marlene was letting me know that she was into the EFT, emotional freedom technique, before the three principles, I wanted to have a conversation about that because my understanding of the emotional freedom technique was that you had emotions that were stuck in your body, and as you were tapping, you were releasing the emotion. So that was my understanding. Obviously, I wasn't a trainer, and so talked to Marlene, and Marlene realigned that thought. So can you just share with people who are listening what is actually EFT?
Well, Jasmine, it's emotional freedom techniques is based on traditional Chinese medicine, and of course, the Chinese medical practitioners for centuries used the little needles and discovered that these acupressure points on the body, and if they stimulated with the needles, that people did come to a more relaxed state. They called it homeostasis because they understood when people were in a better feeling state, if you will, that natural healing could occur. And of course, we know that they augmented their treatments with herbs and things like that. But the EFT or the needling became tapping because we just used select number of points on the face and upper body that they discovered that when we stimulate them through tapping, we're very effective in helping people. We called it releasing emotions in the body, but we now know with the three principles approach that all of our emotions are a product, a manifestation, if you will, of what we're thinking about in the moment. And so during the EFT process, we would have somebody recall an event that they found hurtful or upsetting or even frightening, and then we would tap on these acupressure points with thinking that we were releasing the emotions. But as Jasmine and I were just speaking a few minutes ago, a different understanding would be that as somebody's tapping and speaking, they become more and more into the present moment. They're doing less thinking and become more observant or more observing. And you have to know where to tap, and so it brings you into being more attentive. And so it's if we think about this now through the lens of the three principles, it's actually bringing somebody into the present moment and away from their thinking that contributes to their new sense of peace and well-being. And we've attributed that to the tapping, but what the tapping actually does is bring us present. So it's interesting.
So let me ask you, in your experience, do we store old emotions, old feelings in our bodies?
I don't believe we do. I mean,
No?
when I was in that teaching that modality, that was the understanding at the time. But you think that we're essentially energy, and the energy is shaped by our thoughts in the moment. So if we think that we're storing emotions, like where is that stored? Where's, it's like energy within energy, if you will. Like you think about an emotion being an energy in motion, and it's when we bring the event or the situation to mind through our thoughts is when we actually experience that emotion. But if we're not thinking about it, we're not feeling it. So where does it go in the meantime?
Hmm. 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 Interesting. Hmm. So those of you listening to audio, I'm just rubbing my chin right now. um, yeah, I'm like, so in the three principles, we basically get like what I'm seeing more and more is that we get stuck in the psychology of things, right? We learn things and then we make stuff up and then we believe that that's the truth, basically. Um, and what I'm seeing right now as you're speaking, I'm seeing that I still believe in stuff that's coming from my psychology or my personal thinking. And that's kind of like keeping me stuck in that place, I guess, because I really believed that there are emotions that are stuck in me. But as you're thinking, as you speak, as you said what you just said, which you basically blew my mind because now I'm like, don't even know what to say. You know what I mean? That's like, it's kind of like very radical for me. I'm not saying, I wonder if anybody else is thinking it's radical, but because when I started the conversation about EFT in my mind, I was like, okay, well, I don't really use EFT anymore, but sometimes there are these moments where I'm feeling something and I'm like, but I'm not thinking. Like, what's going on? I'm not thinking. Like, why am I feeling like this? Do you understand?
Well, I've I've kind of come to understand that we have a lot of what we call invisible thinking. We're not always aware of our thinking.
Yeah.
Um, and also one of the things I really love about the principles understanding is that we have a spiritual nature and a psychological nature. And the spiritual nature, of course, is formless. We can't see it, we can't measure it, but we know that our spiritual nature is not um, impacted by our experiences. It's like the witness or the observer of our experiences, and it's our psychological nature, which is very aligned with our physical nature because we literally feel our thinking. That it feels, this body feels real. This feels like this is who I am. But if we also keep in mind our spiritual nature, it's like we're kind of like an individual point of consciousness having experiences through our physical body.
Mm. Talk to me about the invisible thinking. Tell me more about the invisible thinking. Like, what is your
Well, we have,
yeah, but sorry, I'm gonna say
yeah, no,
what's
that's
showing
okay.
up for me. It's like,
Yeah.
it's true because like there's thinking that I see because it shows up in my consciousness and I'm conscious of it. But there's that other thinking that is just doesn't show up in my consciousness. Does that make any sense?
I think so, because how many thoughts do we have each day? Like 50, 60, 70,000 thoughts. They come through. I call it like kind of like the buffet on the, on the moving assembly line. We're kind of in a stream of our thinking. And so not everyone, we call it conscious. We call it what we're aware of it conscious, and what we're not aware of is sort of our subconscious. So I know for myself, like I've woken up in the morning and kind of felt in a bit of a funk, and I have no idea where that came from. But I also know that if I leave it alone, it moves on, all by itself. So there's something about, there must be some aspect of our experience that comes from thinking that we're not aware of.
Mm. Yeah. So if we could just really really see, really understand that the feeling comes from thinking, whether we know what the thinking is or not. And if we can really get that thinking moves, it moves on. It doesn't stay. It's not there to persist.
Right.
It's there to just move. So if you don't do anything with it, meaning if you don't look at it and say, what is this? Where does this come from? How did I get this? Why did I get this? Let it, like all of the things that we do innocently with our psychology, our personal thinking, with what we've been taught. I mean, when we go to school, we're like, okay, why does this equal 2? Well, because 1 + 1 is 2, but why does X equal whatever equals 70? Like we start going into our heads and trying to figure things out. But if we can just stick with, you're going to feel it. The feeling comes from what you're thinking. Doesn't matter what you're thinking. It's going to pass.
Right. In many forms of treatment for people that have mental health challenges are kind of based on kind of our biology, if you will. So, people are depressed because, somehow it's a biological issue. They don't see that it's actually a spiritual issue. Spiritual meaning it's thought that brings the formless into form, and we're experiencing our thinking through our emotions, our feelings. And so, there's still a lot of thinking, if you will, around this idea that our mental health is sort of like a product of our biology, and not of our our thought processes and our patterns of thinking. That if you listen to a person who has a tendency for depression, if you really listen to them, it's quite amazing where they're focused. They're usually focused on things that are not ideal, kind of a hopelessness about what's happening into the world. They kind of see the glass half empty kind of approach to life. And so you can see often, that they're experiencing their thinking in the moment, but they don't see that for themselves because they think that experience is coming from outside of them. And for somebody like myself that experienced a lot of anxiety, it was my conscious or even unconscious thinking about not feeling competent or adequate, or I didn't measure up. And so I experienced a lot of anxiety. We call it Imposter Syndrome. And when I started to see that it was coming from my thinking, it's like, oh, it's like, and even though I was very involved with emotional freedom techniques for over 15 years, that anxiety didn't really go away until I understood where it was coming from.
Mm. Yeah. I remember the first time, me too, I used to do have a lot of anxiety. And it's funny because I have a lot of anxiety around money, and I still do. But now when it happens, like I just laugh, like I just like literally chuckle at myself going, wow, like relax, girl. It's kind of like, during the pandemic, it was like, I was logging into the government site, and I mean, just like I would be fine, grab my mouse, and then I knew, like in my head, I knew I'm gonna go on the government site now. Oh my God, it would just show up. I'd be like, come on. Like it would just like, oh, this big, huge wave of anxiety would just
Mm,
show up in me, you know. But before, it would be the end of the world. Before this understanding,
yeah.
it would be like,
Yeah.
oh my God, now I have to go sleep. Oh my God, this is true. Like I'm going to hell. I'm like, whatever I would make up in that moment. And then I would just, and you know what I would do, which now I see was my own wisdom talking to me. I would either go to sleep or go watch TV, because then I would disconnect from the personal thinking, right?
Right.
And then by
Yeah.
the time I'd wake up, I'd feel better because, oh yeah, okay, yeah, because I disconnected. Now I can just go, okay, let's just wait a little bit. It'll pass, you
Yeah.
know. But I don't know how it is for you, but for me, it's still like there are some areas that I, how can I say, like I don't deal with often, you know, like I just don't go there. Some areas in my life, I don't know, like dealing with my father, whatever, you know, if I don't go there often, then I kind of, it shows up. And then for a moment, I kind of go, okay, wait, it must be thinking, you know, I kind of forget in that moment.
Hmm.
Like there's how often I deal with that realm. I don't know if
Yeah.
you see that for yourself.
I do. And what came to mind as you were saying that was this the idea of these what we call separate realities. Like it's pretty obvious that you and I wouldn't have the same experience of life because we see things differently. You know, and a lot of what we think we see is actually coming through our conditioned thinking, our past experiences, our um, you know, our assumptions. So, you know, if you and I went to the movie, you might love it and I might not like it at all. So,
Yeah.
well, that's pretty clear. But the thing that really fascinated me is that we have our own individual levels, if you will, of consciousness. So, like, say you're in a good mood and you're, you know, going somewhere and you get in a traffic jam and it's like, okay, well, it's a nice day. I'll just listen to the music. And then you can be in exactly the same situation and you're kind of in a bad mood for whatever reason. And suddenly this is like a catastrophe, right? So, you know, we can have such different experiences of the same thing based on our kind of our state of mind, if you will. And I found that really interesting too. So when we see people who have done things that we, you know, certainly don't agree with or unhappy with, we can appreciate that sometimes people made decisions when they were not in a good place, you know, in terms of their well-being. And so I find for me, I have more compassion. I'm more forgiving, more tolerant, more patient with people who get caught up in their own thinking, and you know, act out in ways that aren't ideal.
Yeah. Yeah. Lately, I've been uh, present to judgment. Um, so I kind of had, like earlier this year, I kind of had this insight where I was a judgmental person. And I'm laughing because I thought I wasn't.
Mm,
And then I discovered the bad news that I was, and who I was judging the most was myself, you know? And I kind of like, it's funny, as I saw it, I kind of gave it up. I don't know if it makes any sense.
yep.
Not I still judge myself. I have to admit I still judge myself, but now when I meet people, I'm not like, it doesn't invade my space. I can be with anybody. Um and I used to be with everybody, but it was an effort. Now it's more effortless. Um, but what I'm seeing is how I'm not the only one. Now I can see the judgment, like we're
Mm-hmm.
talking a lot, like, let's say we look at social media, what's going on with social media and a trolling and people being very mean to other people, with things that they're going through, and then all of the things that we hear. And I can see how judgment has become like a norm that
Mm.
is accepted. I feel like it shouldn't be accepted. I think it should be removed from us. I think it disconnects us from the love that we actually are.
I agree. So how I see judgment is that it's sort of like what Sydney Banks talked about, the glass pane with all the scratches on it. So you're not really having a direct experience of a person or a situation. It's coming through your interpretation and your thinking and your judgment or whatever you will about it. And so when people don't understand how their mind works, they assign responsibility to the things they see on the outside, another person's behavior, a situation, um, not understanding that their experience is actually coming through them. And you're right, it absolutely, interferes with feeling close to somebody, with having that level of, feeling a nice connection with somebody. Because if we've got all that thinking in the way, we're not actually really experiencing the essence of the other person.
Yeah. Before I came into the three principles, I was a lot about empowerment, get your power, you're strong, you can do this. And it still associates for me, where I kind of go, well, if you're blaming somebody, you're giving them your power. Like what are you doing? Because you kind of like say it's their fault. So if you want to just be with yourself, own what you have, like, and then you can change it. Once you own your stuff, you can see what you're truly doing, then you can be. That makes sense.
Well, what I found personally, because I've been involved with this understanding for some time now, is the more I kind of understand how it all works, some of those things are just taken care of in the process. So I'm naturally finding myself less anxious. I'm naturally finding myself less judgmental. I'm naturally feeling more present and more compassion for people who are struggling with their own thinking. And so it's just like a nice, side effect, if you want to call it, of coming to this understanding and really truly appreciating how our minds work, how we experience our own individual personal realities, and really what keeps us in the way of really feeling connected.
Yeah. Wow. Well, I think that was a great conversation, Marlene.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, thank you, Jasmyne.
So if people would like to talk to you, how do they do that?
Well, my website is marlenecameron.com.
Okay.
And if they want to send me an email, it's marlene@marlenecameron.com. And if they'd like to, give me a call, have a little chat, my number is 403-209-2142. I'd love to chat with anybody whose interest has been piqued by this conversation.
Fantastic. Well, Marlene, I'm going to take all that information and put it in the description also. So if it happens, they'll be linked. And I want to thank you very much for accepting my impromptu offer. And to everybody else, I'm going to say, dream it, dare it, do it, live the life you want. Take care.